Hey everybody, welcome back to Stats with Ahili. And today we are going to study linear algebra topic, okay? And not just any topic, but the applications of vector spaces in statistics and data science. Now, let me tell you, if you are a BSc first year student, and you have probably finished vector spaces, the first unit of linear algebra, and you're thinking like, what is the application of vector space which we are learning for weeks now? That is, we studied vector spaces, linear independence, dependence, basis, dimension, replacement theorem, deletion theorem, and so many things, right? And I genuinely have no idea why any of this exists, then this is the right video for you. Start with it and understand what are the applications in real life in statistics and data science, okay? Like you're doing the core subject in statistics and data science and you don't know why are we studying linear algebra. This video is for you, okay? Now let me start with this exact question. First is vector spaces. Where does data live? As you can see in the screen. See, for the vector spaces, we first need to understand what is vector space. We said a vector space V is a set with two operations. First is addition and then is scalar multiplication. Then we need to satisfy those 10 axioms which we studied, right? The closure, commutativity, associativity, identity, inverse, and so many more, right? And the main example we worked with was Rn and the set of all ordered n tuples, right, of real numbers. Now, here is a big reveal. Every single data set in statistics, like every spreadsheet, every survey, every observation, is secretly a collection of vectors living inside a vector space. Now, you don't understand this? Let me explain you with a real example. See, imagine you're a doctor, okay, and you're recording data on your patients. For each patient, you're recording five things, okay? First is let it be their blood pressure, then heart rate, sugar level, age, BMI. Like these are the five things you're recording for each patient, okay? So for one patient, you might write down the numbers. For example, the blood pressure is 120, then the heart rate is 75, then sugar is maybe 98, very close to be diabetic, and third is say the age is 45 and the BMI is 27.4. Now that is it, five numbers in a specific order. That right there, the collection of that set which I just said the numbers, which is 120, 75, 98, 45, and 27.4. This set is a vector in R5, right? And the entire vector space of R5 is a universe where all your patient data lives. Okay, if you have 10,000 patients, you have 10,000 vectors, all in the same vector space of R5. Like, do you get my point? Like, every, like, can you relate it to the real life things going on in your surroundings, right? So this is just not a cute observation. The 10 axioms which we studied in unit 1 are which guarantees that this is just happening, the operations you make on your data makes sense, okay? So when you compute the average patient, you like add up all the data vectors and divide by 10,000. That is vector addition and scalar multiplication, right? Which you're operating because this is a vector space. Next, the axioms guarantee the result is still a valid point in R5, still a valid data point for your vector space, right? Without those axioms, the arithmetic would be literally meaningless. Now, let me give you two more examples just to like concrete this idea even more. As you can see, the images as vectors and the text part. Let me first explain the images. Now, take a simple grayscale image. For example, 28 pixel wide and 28 pixels tall. That image has 784 pixels, right? Each pixel has a brightness number from 0 to 255. And what is 0? 0 is the black and 255 is white, okay? The maximum. So the entire image is just a list of 784 numbers, a vector in R784, right? So the famous like the handwritten data digit data set that every machine learning student works with, it's just 70,000 vectors in R784. Okay, the vector space structures is what allows algorithms to compare images, average them, and transform them. So you can see how many arithmetic operations which we are doing on this vector space, right? So all this would not be possible if we could not relate it to a vector space. Okay, now coming to text as vectors. Suppose you have a vocabulary of 10,000 words. Any sentence or document can be written as a vector in R 10,000, where the entry in position like I counts how many times the word I appears. Okay, like where is this used? This is used in Google search, spam filters, sentiment analysis. Like they all start by converting text to a vector in this space. And again, it's a vector space structure that allows them to measure similarity, compute averages, and build models. So the very first application of Unit 1 is this, that the abstract vector space, the abstract vector space in Rn that we define in class is the home address of every dataset that you will ever encounter in statistics and data science. Can you relate it to everything around you? So that is what, when we say that linear algebra is everywhere, this is what we mean. Okay, now coming to the next topic. Okay, topic number two is linear dependence and independence. Like here, you need to understand if your variables are redundant or not. Now, we have talked a lot about linear dependence and independence, right? Like for linear dependence, there will be the vectors, the variables will be redundant, and for independent, the variables will not be redundant, right? Now, moving on to this thing, which is like very practically important topic of unit 1. Okay, so now let me tell you in official language, that is, we define it like this, that a set of vectors is linearly dependent if one of them can be written as a linear combination of the others. Equivalently, we can say that if c1 alpha 1 plus c2 alpha 2 plus c3 alpha 3 goes on to cn alpha n is equals to 0, has a non-trivial solution, meaning that sum of the c is not 0, and if only the trivial solution exists, we will call it the linearly independent. Okay, now here is a direct application in statistics, and this one has a proper technical name. It's called multi-collinearity. Okay, now let me walk you through a story. Imagine you build a model to predict a student's final exam score. You collect two features for each student, their marks in test 1 and their marks in test 2. You feed both these marks or this test score marks in your model. But then you discover something for every single student. This is like hypothetical situation, okay? For every single student, test 2 marks is equals to 2 times test 1 marks. Every single one. Now, what does this mean in vector language? The column of test 2 data is equals to 2 times of column test 1 data. Now, these two columns vectors are linearly dependent, right? Because the values are basically redundant. Now, why do I say so? Because one scalar is just the multiple of the other. Now, when you try to run regression on these linearly dependent columns, your model breaks. Why? Because it literally cannot figure out how much test 1 contributes versus how much test 2 contributes. Because they carry identical information, right? Any split between them works equally well mathematically. The model has infinitely many solutions and becomes completely unreliable. So this is multicollinearity, and every applied statistician has to check for it before turning a regression model. Before running a regression model into something which we should trust, right? Okay. So the fix is what? How do we fix this kind of thing? If we check this our model and see that there is this kind of problem, then how do we fix it? We need to remove one of the dependent variable. It is basically like choosing a linearly independent subset. Okay, so from the dependent set we have to choose a linearly independent subset. Then only we can run our regression model very nicely. Okay, now here is one more classic example. Just a moment. Okay, let's come here and see. One more classic example is that suppose you, I don't know if it is written here or not. I have to check it once more. But before that, let me explain you what is that another example, which is very important and very easy to remember. Okay, see, suppose you accidentally include both temperature in Celsius and temperature in Fahrenheit as separate features in your data set. Well, Fahrenheit is equals to 1.8 times Celsius plus 32, right? Now, one is a linear combination of the other. They are linearly dependent vectors. Any model you build will fail completely because these two columns contain zero additional information beyond each other, right? So, now if I flip the side, now if I need to understand what is the significance of linear dependence in vector space. Now, this is very interesting and very important, okay? Linear independence is what we want. In data science, the goal feature selection is to find the largest set of linear independent features. Each independent feature tells the model something is genuinely new, something that cannot be reconstructed from the remaining features or the previous features which we know, right? Now, algorithms like variance inflation, factor testing are doing exactly this, testing linear independence of your columns when they diagnose multicollinearity. Okay, now there is a different angle on this, like why do we need sometimes we also need linear dependence too. Now, why, where do we use that? If you have 50 features and that are all approximately linear dependent on just three underlying factors, you can replace the 50 columns with three independent ones. So basically, what you did is you have compressed the data massively without losing information. This is the foundation of dimensionality reduction, something we'll touch more on when we discuss dimension on today's class only. Okay, so linear independence and dependence from unit 1 directly translates to one of the most important diagnostic checks in applied statistics. For example, like, are your features giving you genuinely new information, or they're secretly the same thing wearing different clothes? Okay, now coming to the next topic. You can read all these points here. I have told you some of the points from here. I have told you some of the points just by thinking now only. So you should read all the parts, all the notes here, so that you can understand the topics and you can get more examples from my notes. Okay. Okay, coming to the next topic, which is subspaces. Now, you might think that in subspaces, we did not learn much about it, right? We just understood through two or three theorems and we did few questions on it. So, okay, but still, the subspace is again a very important topic in real life or in statistics and data science, okay? See, how did we define subspace? We defined a subspace W of a vector space V as a non-empty subset that is closed under both addition and scalar multiplication. And we always check, does W contain the zero vector? Is it closed under addition, under scalar multiplication? If yes to all three, it is a subspace, right? This was the definition of subspace and how you used to check on the questions, right? Now, the killer application of subspaces in statistics is understanding what a model can and cannot predict. Now, here is the idea. Just think about it. When you build a linear regression model with, say, three features, for example, area of a house, number of rooms, and distance from the city. Now, every prediction your model makes is of the form what? Predicted price is equals to B1, let us say B1 into area column, plus B2 into rooms column, plus B3 into distance column for some numbers b1, b2, b3. The set of all possible predictions as b1, b2, b3 range over all the real numbers is called the column space of your data matrix. And this column space is a subspace of Rn, where n is the number of data points. Okay, the subspace is actually very crucial because it tells you exactly what answers your model is even capable of giving. Like, if the true pattern in your data lies outside the subspace, if the true relationship is something your three features cannot simply express, then no matter how cleverly you tune your model or do something or the other, it will always have high error. Okay, the error vector called the residual is precisely the part of the target that falls outside the subspace, right? When it falls outside the subspace, it will be called the error vector, which is also called the residual. Now, you can think of it this way, that your model lives in a subspace. Okay, now your target might be somewhere in the bigger space. The best your model can ever do is find the closest point in the subspace to the target, and the leftover, the gap is the residual. It lives in the orthogonal complement of the column space, which is another subspace. So here, from in both the cases, we understood how the subspace checks if the model can give the answer or not, right? Now let me give you a real example. Now let me see here. Okay, let us come here to the real example. See, a model predicting house prices using only area and number of rooms. That is a two-dimensional space, right? If location, age of building, and floor number all matter, your subspace is too small. The target doesn't lie in your 2D subspace, so you will always have error. Adding more independent features expands your subspace and reduces the error. So when you have to fix it, how do you fix it? You need to add more independent features, and then we can say that it can reduce the error, right? Now, another beautiful application of subspaces is in signal processing. A pure audio signal, say a recording of a single musical note, lives in a very small subspace of all possible sounds, and background noise lives in a much larger space. Signal processing algorithms identify the signal subspace and project the noisy recording onto it, keeping only the part that is in the signal subspace and discarding the rest as noise. Now, this is so important, right? And we have studied in our unit 1 subspace. Like, this is so interesting because that little two theorems which we studied and the theorems which we worked on proving that if it is subspace or not. Now, why did we do all those hard work? To understand the actions behind it, right? So all the actions which we do on this subspace is so important to understand for this small word, right? Okay, so basically a subspace in statistics and data science represents a space of possible model outputs. Understanding its structure tells you what your model can explain and where its limitations are. Okay, okay, now coming to the most important topic, basis, the language your data speaks in. Like, can you understand that by the title which I have written, the language the data speaks? And basis is one of my favorite topic in unit 1 because this is so important, so conceptually driven, and this is just so interesting to learn, right? Now, we define basis as a set of vectors B that satisfies two conditions. First, it is linearly independent. Second, that it spans the space. Now, both the conditions together. A basis is the minimum information needed to describe every element of the space uniquely. Like, this is a huge, massive information, right? So, yes, the first thing I want you to notice is you're already using a basis every time you open a spreadsheet, like every single time. When you have a data set with columns, for example, height, weight, and then age, those three columns are your basis direction. Each row of data is a vector, and its entries are what? Its coordinates with respect to that basis, right? Like, for example, that number in that height column, for example, 172, 172 means that 172 units along the height direction. So can you relate the coordinates with the direction thing? So yes, that's exactly what coordinates happen with respect to a basis. Okay, so choosing a different basis means that re-expressing your data in a new coordinate system, and this is incredibly powerful. Okay, the right basis can make a data set much more easier to understand and analyze. Now let me give you a very concrete example. Yes. See, for simple example from machine learning, suppose you have a feature like color, which takes the values red, blue, and green, right? You cannot feed the word red into a mathematical model. So what do? You create three vectors. For example, you create the vectors to be standard basis. Let's say 100 for red, and then 010 for green, and then 001 for blue. Now each category gets its own basis vector. This is called one hot encoding, and it's used in literally every machine learning pipeline that deals with categorical data. Like this is so important, right? Like notice what we did here. We created a basis, the standard basis of R3, and we assigned one basis vector to each category. The resulting vectors are linearly independent. They span R3 and they uniquely represent each category. That is the definition of basis applied directly in color grading, right? Now, here's slightly more advanced but very important example. See, in economics and finance, data often comes as a time series. Sales figures each week, stock prices each day, temperature readings each hour. These time series can be expressed in a different basis called the Fourier basis, okay? Made up of sine and cosine waves of different frequencies. Let me show you this. Okay. Okay, so when you write your time series in the Fourier basis, each coordinate tells you how much of a particular frequency is present in your data. And this reveals hidden patterns like detecting that sales spike every 7 days, a weekly cycle, which I mean, or that there's a yearly seasonal trend. The Fourier transform is literally a change of basis. Same data, different coordinate system, much cleaner structure. So this is not something which we learned in statistics department. Statistics, okay, in but in mathematics, if you're studying mathematics, you must have learned Fourier series in a much extended form, right? So basis from unit 1 teaches us that the coordinate system you choose for your data is a genuine choice, and different bases reveal different things. Choosing a good basis is one of the core skills of a data scientist. Then you can form so many new things, right? Now we will come to dimension. So this is our second last topic. Now see, we are almost there, okay? Now we proved in unit 1 that the dimension of a vector space is the number of vectors in any basis. And crucially, all bases have the same size, so this number is well defined. Dimension is the minimum number of independent coordinates you need to uniquely describe any point in the space. Now, in statistics and data science, dimension has profound practical consequences, and they are captured in a term you have probably heard, the curse of dimensionality. Now, what is the curse? Here is a problem. Let me explain you. Imagine you have data in two dimensions, say height and weight of the people. You collect 100 data points and they cover the space reasonably well. Now, imagine you add a third dimension, age, for example. Suddenly, those same 100 points are much more sparsely spread out. And a fourth dimension, if you add a fifth, sixth, a tenth, then what happens? Your data, your 100 data points are now 100 tiny specks scattered across a vast 10-dimensional space. They are so spread out that there are no nearby points to compare. Like we were doing that to compare, right? No local patterns to detect. And this makes learning from data exponentially harder as dimensionality grows. That is what I mean. So this is the curse of dimensionality, that when your data is growing exponentially, then when the dimension grows, then it is very hard to understand and to detect what we want to know from that data, right? The solution is to find the true intrinsic dimension of your data. Okay, this is the solution, often much smaller than the number of columns in your spreadsheet. Like for example, I have a beautiful example here. See, suppose you have 100 students, each described by their marks in 10 subjects. That sounds like a 10-dimensional data set. But when you look closely, you find that all 10 subject scores are perfectly correlated. For this is hypothetical situations, okay? So yes, if we see that if it is perfectly correlated, every student who does well in one subject does well in all of them. If I just say like that. So really one number, the student's overall academic ability can be explained everything, right? The intrinsic dimension is 1 then, not 10. So those 9 extra dimensions are adding no genuine information. Formally, this is captured by the rank of the data matrix, the dimension of the column space. A data set with 1000 columns but rank 5 has intrinsic dimension 5. 995 columns are redundant. So in unit 1 terms, those 995 columns are linearly dependent on the 5 basis columns. Can you relate to all the topics which are so much linked in Unit 1, right? Now, dimension also connects directly to a problem called overfitting in machine learning. If your model has too many parameters, which is basically too high dimension, related to the number of data points you have, it will memorize your training data instead of learning the true underlying pattern. The classic rule is you need at least 10 data points per dimension of your model. So if you have a 50 dimensional feature space, you need at least 500 data points for a reliable model. Okay. And finally, dimension drives data comparison. For example, JPEG image compression works by finding a low dimensional subspace that captures most of the visual information in an image. Instead of storing that 5 lakh pixel values of a photo, you store just a few hundred coordinates in the right basis. Now, this is important. The right basis is very important. The compression ratio is directly determined by the ratio of the compressed dimension of the original to the original dimension. Okay. So, dimension from Unit 1 tells us how complex a dataset truly is. It determines storage requirements, the amount of data needed to learn reliability, and the amount of data needed to learn how to be rely on that, and how efficiently we can compress information. Okay, so that is basically all for dimension. And let us come to the topic 6, and topic 6 is basically replacement and deletion theorem. Let me tell you, this is the most important topics, and I have also given presentation on this on my class. Okay, so this is like very interesting, but I did on replacement and deletion theorem, but on real life. But here, this is also real life, but just sticking on to this one part, that I want to see what is the use of replacement and deletion theorem in statistics and data science. Okay, so finally these two theorems we proved at the end of Unit 1, right? The replacement theorem and the deletion theorem. Now these feel quite abstract when you first see them, like we have to just take a beta and then replace it. So all these things which we did, it doesn't really quite relate to the real life, right? Now let me remind you what we had to say for the replacement theorem. Now, I mean, what does the replacement theorem say? It says that if you have a basis and you bring in a new vector, that is in the span of the space but not a combination of the remaining vectors, you can swap it in for one of the basis vectors and you still have a basis. The dimension does not change. And what does the deletion theorem say? It says that if you have a set that spans a space but is linearly dependent, meaning it has one too many vectors, one that is redundant, you can delete the redundant vector and the remaining set still spans the same space, right? Now, the deletion theorem is a theoretical backbone of stepwise regression. Let me explain you this. In applied statistics, you often start with a large set of features like 20 or 30 variables, and you want to find the smallest subset that still explains the outcome well. Stepwise regression does this iteratively, like very nicely, basically. Okay. At each step, it identifies the most redundant variable, the one whose information is already captured by the remaining variables, and then deletes it. Then it checks again and again delete it. So this is the stepwise regression. Each deletion step is valid because the deleted variable was linearly dependent on, or nearly so in statistical sense, the remaining variables, right? So the deletion theorem guarantees that you can remove it and still span the same predictive space. The model does not lose its explanatory power, it just gets simpler. From all those 20, 30 variables, it now got smaller and simpler. This is the principle of even parsimony, right? The simplest model that explains the data is the best. The deletion theorem gives a mathematical guarantee that simplifying is always possible when the redundancy exists. Okay. Now coming, this was the stepwise regression. Now coming to this replacement theorem. Now, see, this one shows up in a very practical problem in social science and economics research. Sometimes a variable you really want to measure is something abstract. For example, like socioeconomic status or quality of life or social capital. These are meaningful concepts, but you can't directly record them as a number, right? So researchers use proxy variables. Now, this is sounding very interesting, right? What is proxy variables? Measurable quantities that stand in for the abstract concept. Okay, so for example, monthly household income.
Now, how can we write as the proxy for this socioeconomic status? We can say, what did I say? Now, monthly household income can be the proxy for socioeconomic status, and then for health quality, what can be the proxy variable? It can be number of doctor visits per year, and then basically this is how we work with proxy variables. The replacement theorem tells us if this proxy is genuinely independent from the other variables in your model, if it brings new information, then you can replace the original abstract variable with the proxy and the model's column space is unchanged. The model is just as powerful. You have swapped one basis vector for another, right? Every time an economist or sociologist substitutes a proxy variable into a model, they are, whether they know it or not, applying the replacement theorem only. Okay, so that is basically, yes, that is basically done for today's class, as I can see. So let's do a quick recap of what we just covered. Okay, vector spaces. Your data lives in Rn. Every observation is a vector. The 10 axioms make arithmetic on data valid. Okay, linear dependence and independence is what redundant features are linearly dependent column vectors. Multi-collinearity is linear dependence. Feature selection is finding linearly independent subsets. Okay, subspaces. The set of all possible model predictions is a subspace. Understanding your model's limitation means understanding the geometry of this subspace. This is so interesting. And basis, the most interesting one, your spreadsheet columns are a basis. Just remember that. Encoding categorical data, Fourier analysis of time series, coordinate transformations, all about choosing the right basis. Okay. And then coming to dimension, the true complexity of your data can be observed from here, drives the curse of dimensionality overfitting and data compression ratios, right? And the last one which we studied is the replacement and the deletion theorem. Stepwise regression uses the deletion theorem. Proxy variable substitution in research uses the replacement theorem. Now, basically, what I want to say is that Unit 1 is not abstract mathematics for its own sake. It is the foundation that the entire modern statistics and data science is built on. Every time a data scientist cleans a data set, builds a model, or compresses an image, they're working inside a vector space, using bases, worrying about dimension, checking linear independence. They just don't always know what they're calling it, but they are doing absolute linear algebra. So the next time when you think that why are we even studying linear algebra, that is a topic for mathematics and not statistics, just remember this video, that all over statistics and data science you need linear algebra. Okay, so I hope this video made Unit 1 feel alive and meaningful for you. If I did it, then please do hit the subscribe button. It genuinely means a lot and helps me making this content for you all. If you have any questions, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you have a specific topic you want, you can comment down that too. Okay. Thank you for watching. Take care. Keep studying. And I'll upload these notes in my description box, and even I do not have any handwritten notes for this because this is just a recap for Unit 1 and the application of Unit 1. So take care, and yes, that is all. Keep studying, stay curious, and bye bye. I'll see you in the next one.